Hey there everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Survive Paddy Plays. This is a bit different. This is a top 10 list, and I know that these are divisive things. This is just me telling you my top 10 favourite PSOne Survival Horror Games. So, let's not beat around the bush, let's get straight into this. Number 10. Number 10 on this list is CALERIANS. CALERIANS is a really odd, weird game that I love. I've loved it since I first played it. I don't fully understand why. It's awful to play. The gameplay itself is actually pretty atrocious. However, the story is pretty bizarre and interesting, and it's probably one of the few games I can think of off the top of my head where you basically shoot up drugs to get superpowers. I'm sure there's a whole subgenre of those games, but yeah, this is definitely the first one I remember playing. CALERIANS did well enough that there was a sequel brought out on the PS2 called CALERIANS Ash, but it's often forgotten about. So yeah, definitely number 10, had to make this list somewhere. Check out CALERIANS, it's a bizarre little oddity. At number 9 on this list, we have another oddity. We have KOUDELKA. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of KOUDELKA. KOUDELKA is a really bizarre kind of RPG survival horror hybrid. KOUDELKA would go on to spawn the Shadow Heart series on the PS2, which was a successful series of RPGs. But this first game was definitely more horror focused. It was set in a gothic castle. You played as the lead character wandering around solving puzzles. Quite difficult. I remember this game being super tricky when I played it back in the day. But yeah, it had a really interesting visual style, at least in terms of the full motion cutscenes. I remember it came on 4 discs back in the day. This is a beefy game. It's definitely, I would feel wrong to leave it off this list because it is an oddity like CALERIANS, but it is well worth your time. Number 8 on this list was really hard for me to decide on. There was 2 games kind of vying for the spot, but I ended up deciding to go with Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, which is a survival horror game that was on the PS1 Dreamcast. It's a really interesting game. It has the same kind of pre-render backgrounds as Resident Evil and also includes kind of 3D character models like Resident Evil. It's basically very much when Alone in the Dark started to rip off Resident Evil instead of the other way around, because originally the first Resident Evil game was very much accused of kind of plagiarizing Alone in the Dark, and then by the time Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare rolled around, it was kind of mimicking the Resident Evil games. In Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, you play as Edward Carnby or Aileen Cedric. Yep, that's right, there's 2 campaigns and they're actually relatively different. While you do kind of go through the same locations, they play out very differently. Edward's campaign is definitely more action focused, while Aileen's campaign sees you solving more puzzles and using light to deter the monsters. It's got a very eldritch H.P. Lovecraft vibe as you wander and explore around this island setting. It's a really good game. It's sizable enough. It takes quite a while to complete. It's pretty difficult. It's challenging. If you're looking for a challenging survival horror game, Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare is your thing. Now, as I said, I was tying with 2 for the number 8 spot, and one of them was Parasite Eve, which I've put at number 7. The reason that I didn't want to put Parasite Eve at number 8 is because I friggin' love this game, and I know it's more RPG than survival horror. I'm absolutely aware of that, but this game has some of the most horrifying transformation sequences I've ever seen. It's got an amazing story. The characters are so good. Aya Brea, the lead character, is like iconic at this point. It's a game that never really got enough love in Europe because it didn't get a release here. Funnily enough, I remember picking up Parasite Eve 2 when it came out here and just being like absolutely distraught that I couldn't play Parasite Eve 1 until I finally imported it from the US and I had a device to play imported games on my PlayStation. Parasite Eve is like story driven. It's like 40-50 hours of gameplay. It is challenging. It's terrifying. I know it's an RPG, but it's still friggin' scary. When you see a rat like exploding into this gigantic monster the way they do in Parasite Eve, it'll scare the bejesus out of you, in my opinion. Parasite Eve number 7, really cool game, and it spawned 2 sequels, Parasite Eve 2 and The Third Birthday, which was on the PSP. It was nowhere near as good, but yeah, this is a cool franchise. Also is based on a book, and there's also a movie based on that book, also called Parasite Eve. Definitely check it out and watch out that your mitochondria doesn't explode out of your body, because that's bad. Number 6 on this list is another kind of oddity, but a lot of people seem to have played it, which is Clock Tower. Now, this was not the first Clock Tower game. There was actually a Clock Tower game that came before on the Super Nintendo, but this was definitely the one that most people seem to remember. This game kind of centers on your protagonist who's being hunted by a dude named Scissorman. He attacks you with giant scissors. The voice acting is some of the worst.
The evil victims were slashed to death.
With a knife?
No, it sounds crazy, but it looks like they were killed with a giant pair of scissors.
It makes Resident Evil look Oscar-worthy by comparison.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
But this game, it's... Even to this date, it's scary because you have absolutely no way of kind of defending yourself. You have to run, hide. The controls are god-awful, so that kind of adds to the feeling of terror. This is definitely a game that is getting a Let's Play on this channel. It's a game that I played to death as a young fella, and I could not leave it off this list. For PS1 era survival horror games, this is one of the formative ones for a lot of people. Number 5, and number 5 was a difficult enough one to pick, but I had to go with it, and that is Dino Crisis. I wanted to put Dino Crisis higher, if I'm being totally honest with you, because I remember when I played this game, it blew my friggin' mind. Basically, Resident Evil with dinosaurs. What could you say is wrong about that? Absolutely nothing. You play as Regina, you're on an island looking for a guy named Dr. Kirk, who's believed to have been killed, but he's actually not, and there's friggin' dinosaurs everywhere. So, whereas in like Resident Evil you had Tyrant and Nemesis and stuff chasing you, in this you got a big friggin' T-Rex just bombarding its way towards you. So, I do remember being absolutely terrified. And even still, I've played it again recently, and this is a hard game. Like, it's not just down to the tank controls either. It's actually very challenging. Like, ammo's super scarce. I do remember that Capcom at the time called this panic horror, and it was also what they were calling Resident Evil 3, which was a little different to their traditional survival horror. But yeah, Dino Crisis is brilliant. It's due for a remake. Come on, Capcom. Give us it. Stop messing around. We want it in the Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 style. But yeah, Dino Crisis is well worth checking out if you haven't before, even with its kind of dated tank controls and everything. So we're into the top 4, and you will not be surprised to learn that one series has 3 of these spots. What you might be surprised about, and I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but as I say, this is my personal opinion. Number 4 is Resident Evil 2. Now, I know that people are going to go absolutely crazy because Resident Evil 2 is considered by a lot of fans to be one of the absolute best in the series. For me, it didn't connect with me at the time, so I've always had a hard time with it. Obviously, I've reevaluated it as the years have gone by, and I've gone back to it, and I've fallen in love with it. Between going back to the original and also playing the remake, I absolutely love it. I love the characters. I love Leon. I love Claire. I love I love William and William and Sherry Birkin. No, Sherry Birkin annoys me in all iterations. I love William and Annette Birkin. They're interesting characters. Hunk, it's a great game, and it brought in a lot more action elements. I know that people kind of say that 4 was when it went totally action, but even the jump from 1 to 2 with the custom weapons, like being able to enhance your shotgun and enhance your weapons through custom parts, was it started to move the game in that direction of like, okay, let's let you empower yourself a lot more. Whereas in the first game, in Resident Evil 1, you were basically like, you had nothing. You had like a knife and 4 bullets, and you had to keep one of those to shoot yourself. But yeah, Resident Evil 2 tells the story of Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. It came on 2 discs. You could play through each campaign on its own. It was pretty innovative and revolutionary at the time because it had an A and B game for each character, where you saw the events play out differently depending on which order you played them in. Resident Evil 2 is a true classic. The remake was a phenomenal remake of this, but I still have a soft spot for the OG, and I will go back to it time and time again. And I'm sorry to anybody who is upset that I put this ahead of the next 3 games, but there's a reason the next 3 games have a very special connection to me personally. Now we're into the top 3, and at number 3, I have chosen Resident Evil Director's Cut. So this is obviously Resident Evil 1, the game, the granddaddy, the game that started them all. I absolutely adore this game, always have. I remember the first time I ever played it at a friend's house, the dogs bust through the window and I basically vacated my bowels, more or less all over the place, and was like, I need to get a PlayStation right now. So I went out and I got a part-time job at like 12 years old so I could save up to buy a PS1 just for Resident Evil. But yeah, I love Resident Evil. It tells the story of Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, who are trapped in a mansion in the Arklay Mountains, which is basically full of zombies, zombie dogs, crows, snakes, tyrants. This game just had an amazing catalogue of monsters. Hunters, oh my god, the hunters. I remember the first time I saw the hunters cutscene, it absolutely terrified me. But yeah, Resident Evil 1 there's a reason it's the daddy of them all. It's amazing. Like, I still think to this day it is just as good as it ever was. The remake that came out for the GameCube back in the early 2000s was absolutely brilliant, and that has been ported to everything like the PlayStation, the Switch, PC, Xbox, and you can check that out now. It's actually probably the best version of the game. I will still go back to Director's Cut personally because it holds a lot of kind of nostalgia and fond memories for me. But at the same time, I understand how dated it is. So if you wanted to play this game, the remaster of Resident Evil 1 is an amazing way to do it. But yeah, number 3, Resident Evil Director's Cut, and now we're down to the last 2. And as I said, there's 3 of one franchise in this list, and I think you know what number 2 is going to be, right? Number 2 in my PS1 era top 10 survival horror games is Silent Hill. The first Silent Hill. This game was revolutionary. It absolutely blew my mind. And what my favorite thing about this game is that the reason it's so scary and the reason it's so fondly remembered is because of the limitations of the hardware of the PlayStation 1. Konami were forced to basically put in loads of fog to hide draw distance, and that ended up giving the game this aesthetic that has become kind of synonymous with it. And anytime people try to kind of remaster or update the game, they lose it because the better quality you get, the less it feels like Silent Hill, you know? I remember, again, like with Resident Evil, the first time I ever played this game, I actually I had a Sega Mega Drive, and I traded it with my cousin to get his copy of Silent Hill because he didn't want to play it anymore. He wasn't fond of it, so he basically swapped with me for my Sega Mega Drive. So I gave him a whole friggin' console just to get Silent Hill 1. But I remember playing that every day. I was terrified, like absolutely. When you're in the school and little babies are bobbling around and everything about this game. And then there's the numerous endings. It's got like a Twin Peaks vibe, kind of Jacob's Ladder vibe. This game kind of, in a weird way, this game influenced a lot of my cinematic tastes when I played it back in the day, because it did lead me to go and check out things like Jacob's Ladder, which I would not necessarily have seen. But yeah, number 2 on this list is the original Silent Hill, because it is a fundamentally important game in the history of survival horror. Now we're down to the number 1 spot, and again, no, there's no point in it. You know what it is, right? You've seen my Resident Evil 3 review. Number 1, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. This is probably, alongside Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid, my favourite PS1 game. Those 3 games were the games that I played the most on my PlayStation 1. And Resident Evil 3 stars Jill Valentine from the original Resident Evil. She's stuck in Raccoon City and she is being hunted by the scariest monster in the entire franchise, more or less, a big hulking chatterer knockoff called Nemesis, and he is terrifying. He will appear out of nowhere and just like burst through walls. He is strong, he is fast. I absolutely love this game. I remember when I got it, I brought a friend over to check it out, and I remember when Nemesis burst through the wall in the police station, he actually threw my controller across the room and it broke off the wall. So yeah, that maybe I should hate this game because I lost a controller to it, but as I say, I just remember laughing. I was so delighted that it got that reaction from him. Resident Evil 3 it brought in so much to the series. It brought in combining ammo, it brought in quick dodge, it brought in quick turn. Like, Resident Evil 3 really stepped up the game of Resident Evil, like, and you can kind of see the transition from 3 to 4 because the game had started to move in that kind of more action direction in 3 with the combining ammo and all that stuff. But yeah, my number 1 PS1 era survival horror game is Resident Evil 3. Always has been, always will be. Look, your list is probably entirely different, and that's totally fine. There is no right and wrong here, in my opinion. But I would love to hear what your top 10 PS1 era survival horror games are. I'm sure a lot of you will have Resident Evil 2 as number 1, and that's totally cool. As I say, I love Resident Evil 2 now. And a lot of you will probably have Silent Hill as number 1. Also awesome. The top 3 for me in particular are like interchangeable, like all of them could be number 1. But yeah, I'd love to check out your list. Please comment down below with your top 10 PS1 era survival horror games. I'm going to be back at some stage in the future with another one of these lists. I'm going to be doing the top 10 PS2 era survival horror games. So if you have any speculation as well about that or any thoughts, go right ahead. Again, because I'm kind of an unconventional dude, I might surprise you with my choices. But yeah, thank you so much for checking out this video. Comment down below with your thoughts, and please like and subscribe. It helps massively, and it makes me want to keep doing this, and I really want to keep doing this because I love talking about survival horror games. Anyhow, as per always, peace out, and honestly, let's survive together. Thanks so much.